Welcome everybody to this episode of MSP 1337. Again, I am blessed to be joined by none other than the Joshua Smith of Varonis. Welcome, Josh.
I like the I'm going to add that in there.
How about the blessed?
Oh, that too. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm never going to turn down any offerings of blessings.
Blessings. Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. So without further ado, I want to jump right into a conversation on a topic that I think everybody deals with, no one addresses. And the topic that I have focused my efforts on is how do you secure people? Cybersecurity as a focus on the individual as opposed to organizations that are now budgeting lots of money on cybersecurity for their organization. So in having the conversation around what I liken to the three pillars of people, right? The three pillars of cybersecurity: people, process and procedure, and products and services. Got to get those three P's in there, right?
Alliteration.
So Josh, what is, in your opinion, an area to start? Because I think if I think about our goals as cybersecurity experts, it's how do we ensure that bad things don't happen? And we hear this all the time. Your weakest link is going to be people. Mm-hmm. And I would argue that the weakest link isn't just people, it's the consumer, me as a consumer as opposed to me as an employee. Not because there aren't employee internal breaches that happen, but I mean, we do things as individuals in our personal life as consumers that we would either never get away with because there's hurdles in place or obstacles in place that we have to get around that would at least give us pause before we continue, that doesn't exist in the consumer world. So talk me through where you think, because we're both consumers by the fact that we live in a consumer-driven culture. So
Sure.
So just step me through you thinking through where to start.
In terms of people, I mean, yeah, and I think we talked about consumer, we talked about users, and I mean they're essentially different sides of the same coin, right? And I think that the difference in terms of security is, in some ways, the security environment they're in is dictated by somebody else, right? So at work, it's essentially dictated by your IT, your IS company policies. Like, you always get that sheet that says, don't do any personal browsing on your work computer, that kind of stuff, which we all, of course, strictly abide by, right? And then at home, the vendors you're using, the bank you're using, right, the credit card you're using, all that kind of stuff. They established kind of the rules of the game, and we as consumers and as users really don't have much choice to say, if we are kind of security savvy, to say we want more, right? Like, you're not really going to go to your company and say, I want you to enable two-factor authentication, or I want you to start to leverage a single sign-on. I want you to implement Okta, right? You're not really going to say that. And the same with the bank or credit. You could make that suggestion, drop it in the suggestion box, which at the bottom is a hole, and below that is a shredder. So it just kind of goes right into there. So you can only go as far as you're given access to. So like the credit union I'm with, they do, their two-factor is with SMS. Sure. And obviously there's a very well-known gaping hole in that when it comes to SIM swapping. So I would love it if they would maybe enable push notification or like Microsoft or Google Authenticator. So if you are kind of trying to push that boundaries of security, you're kind of limited. But at the same time, as a consumer, we all do this. We try to go towards the least effort a lot of times, right? So if we can do something and not have to do too much, like even I get annoyed when I log in sometimes and they're like, oh, check your phone for messages, right? It's a constant struggle of wanting to be safe, but not wanting to be hassled for that extra 5 seconds to keep us secure.
So let's pause.
That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, let's pause for a second, because the thought that comes to mind for me when I think like what you said about, I'm not going to, as a consumer, take this to work and be like, when are you rolling this out? In my head, I think of like, I can go to the Baskin Robbins and choose from, 21 flavors of ice cream. And and how many scoops of ice cream and whether I want it on a waffle cone or a sugar cone or in a bowl. And
Is it 37 flavors? I don't know. I think you got to have the listeners chime in on that.
You might be right about that. Or do I get it with 2 spoons and I share it? I mean, the list just goes on and on and on, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But then I think about, like, if I were to just strip the layers back and think more consumer driven, it's like, well, a consumer wants all the flavors, right? At the end of the day, they've been working with vanilla or chocolate. You get choices A or B, and they'd be happy if you suddenly said, oh, by the way, here it comes in a swirl. You can get both flavors. If we think cybersecurity, we could strip it down almost to that level. If we could just help consumers get to a level of consistency with the choices they're making on security, it's like you're always picking the swirl, right? Because at least it's not plain vanilla or plain chocolate. It's something more than that. It's not just a username and password. You're adding that extra layer, even if it's not a perfect 2-factor authentication. Again, we go back to, it's still better than no 2-factor authentication.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Well, I mean, I think when it comes to working with consumers or working with, organizations, especially from an MSP standpoint, you kind of have to take the Apple approach, right? Like if Steve Jobs opened ice cream parlor, you'd get, vanilla in a cup. That's it. You just walk in, give them your $2 and you walk out with ice cream, right? And I kind of feel like it's probably best that sometimes, like if you ever walk into a diner, like the kind of a more old school diner, and they drop down this, it's not a trifold, it's not a quad fold, it's like a sextuple fold menu.
Oh, right.
And you have no idea. You have no idea where to start. Whereas opposed to you walk into some other places and it's like price fix, right? Like, okay, you're gonna get a salad, you're gonna get an entree, you're gonna get dessert. And sometimes that's like, awesome, amazing, thank you.
We call that a large group menu when you have more than 10 or 15 people sitting down at the same table. They're like, and your choices are A.
Yeah. So for sure that, and I think that kind of stuff when it comes to, getting consumer buying and getting end user buying, right? When you go into a consumer, you shouldn't really be selling. Sorry, we're going to a company for MSPs, right?
Right.
I don't think you should be selling like McAfee AV or Sophos AV. You should be essentially just selling security, right? Because really, I mean, they might have some preferences, but you are the expert when it comes to this. Because remember, 1% more than they do, right? So you should just be selling them security. And I feel the same kind of thing when it comes to consumers. Is we just got to make it as easy as possible. I think earlier we were kind of talking like password management is great. And a lot of times consumers are already using it without even knowing it, right?
Right.
The Chrome safe password.
The language is missing.
Yeah, the Apple whatever keychain or whatever.
Right.
So we got to kind of bring the same thing to organizations and just say this is kind of like baseline security, and we know what's in it. They don't need to know about the firewall. They don't need to know about the EDR. They don't need to know about umbrella and all these other things we're cramming in there. They just need to know that we're providing them the end result, which is a more secure environment, so they're not going to wind up in the news or having to offer all their employees, credit monitoring for a year
or YubiKeys and just so you just kind of to some extent we just kind of spilled all the different flavors that are at Baskin Robbins, right? We sort of did. Yeah.
I'm a rainbow sherbet kind of guy. So
I'm not opposed to that. I remember being a big fan of like getting the bubble, the bubble gum, the gumball bubble gum.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved the bubblegum ice cream, but I hated all the gumballs in it because it just made it hard and I couldn't chew it. And then it's like,
I don't want my solids in my semis.
Exactly.
I don't want to crunch into ice cream. It just,
that's right.
Just don't get it.
And you never know, especially as you get older. It's like, did I just crack a tooth? But here's the thing. You just described as a consumer what I want, right? Like I want choices. But when we talk about cybersecurity, we're literally going the opposite. Like we're having to help the consumer overcome the consumerism nature that says I need to be able to choose from 8 or 9 different, and we're seeing that starting to happen, right? Like the box store used to define our shopping habits. The going to the actual mall was a habit that we all enjoyed because you could walk down and throughout the center of the mall and you had all these choices to choose from. Now we don't have choices anymore. We have, if there's a box store, it's the only box store in a mall, if the mall is still even open. But our minds are programmed, I think, to look for options, even when we don't need them. So how do you overcome that piece? Because I think it's there. I think we're getting close. It's that the cybersecurity component.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity is what enables us potentially to go back to chocolate, vanilla, or swirl.
Okay. I'm gonna come back at you, and I'm gonna focus on your glasses.
Okay.
Right? I assumed you picked those frames, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you pick your prescription?
No, I had to go one or two or three, three
Exactly.
or one.
So
Yeah,
it was a prescriptive prescription,
it was a
right?
prescriptive prescription.
Right.
Yes.
So yeah, I think we can give, like, pick your color of iPhone kind of thing, right? I'm going to go back to Apple
Yeah.
because
No, that's a
they're
good
very good.
analogy.
They're very good at saying, you get a choice at these very kind of insignificant things, right?
But you're not
So
getting WiDi 6 yet because you don't know what that is, or
yeah,
5G is not available in your
yeah.
area, but you're buying an iPhone, so it doesn't really
You could
matter.
go, listen, you could go Microsoft Authenticator or you could
Right.
go Google Authenticator. Those are your two choices.
Sure.
Really, the mechanisms are all the same. The results are the
Yep.
same, but you get to pick the color of your Model T, right? You're still
Sure.
getting a Model T. You're getting black or white, essentially, right? So I think we need to, for the illusion of choice, right? We
Right.
can give them that kind of option, right? But when it gets down to it, again, being the 1% above you experts,
Yeah.
right, we're going to say, you're getting this, you're getting this, you're getting this. And here are some kind of areas where you can kind of tweak the option, right? You can get small, medium, or large, but you're still going to get the bulk of what we're prescribing that you get, so you can see, right? So that you can have good security.
So to summarize, and we really jumped, like, I think I want to be clear, the most important piece that we are to focus on is the people part, which I think we kind of, I don't want to say we glazed over, but we jumped to the technology. And I think that's important too, because that's really what drives consumerism, products and services. Like, well, that's who we are, right? We want to buy something. And to sum it up, what we're really saying is, on the technology component, I can give you a lot of choices, but only give you two choices, right? I'm giving you, you can pick from 25 different colors, but it's still an iPhone, right? We're not changing that part of it. So with regards to security, we'll just use Windows as an example. If you're just using Windows Defender, that's still better than choosing not to use anything, right? Like, that really was an A versus B, choosing security versus not, right? So let's fast forward a little bit and jump into what I think is the part that in the work world we know we don't want to talk about, but it's easier per se to talk about it in the consumer individual me world, because I don't have anybody else that has to sign off on adopting process and procedure for me. So we talked about it before we jumped on the call about the things that we do in our lives that equate to process and procedure, regardless of how well we've documented them. And the first one that comes to mind, I just had a bank account compromise, and someone has spent lots of money against my account. So my ATM or Visa card, whatever's been compromised. What do I do? And you answered really quickly. You're like, I panic. It's like, and then you calm down a little bit.
And then I Google my bank to find their phone number, right? Yep. I Google my bank to find their phone number and then call them and then smash a bunch of buttons until I get an operator, right?
Yeah. And then theoretically you get a new card, we go through the process, you get your money back, you're angry, potentially you go to another bank, whatever, but the process then potentially repeats itself. And not to keep going back to the iPhone, but since the world of wallet has come into play, yesterday I didn't know what was in my wallet. Today I can at least go, well, if I lost my wallet and I have my phone, I at least know, oh, these are the 3 cards that I'm missing because that's what was in my wallet, right?
Right, yeah.
So we just defined a process procedure that exists in most of our heads based on sort of the knee-jerk reaction of something bad happening. But what about the documents that we should be process procedures that are more, I'm going to say, thought out? Like you mentioned that you just recently put together a will.
Mm-hmm.
As a consumer, these are relatively easy things to actually document better than, say, in my head for the bank. But if we were to take this a little bit further and start focusing on the perspectives of what does that mean in the vein of security, now what does that look like? Because we should be able to apply the same principle. Help me out here.
Well, I think maybe in more of the corporate environment, we don't get exposed to all the policies and procedures that are kind of running our life cycle in the org, because we have the HR department, we've got the legal department, right? You've got governance kind of taking care of all that for you. But it kind of in a way, and I've been mulling this over in my head about like how we're kind of on our own in the personal world, but not necessarily, because we essentially have to kind of build our own corporation in our personal life. right? You go and you kind of get a family planning a lawyer for the most
Yeah.
part, right? And they walked me through all this paperwork. Like all I did was I just like said yes, no, yes, no, for the most part. And they did all the heavy lifting, right? So they built out the policies for me. Same with the bank, right? The bank kind of does that for me. And if you've got a financial investor, they do a lot of all those policies and procedures for you, right? So we kind of outsource a lot of our policies and procedures when it comes to our interaction with the outside world, where I think maybe it changed a little bit more when we start looking at the inside world of kind of what's in between our four walls with,
Sure.
how we run our daily lives, like, when we go to the grocery store, what do we buy, that kind of stuff. That's
Right.
left up to more of us. But I think where it comes more to like where things meet the legal side of things, and again, I think both personal and in corporate, we've got resources that we leverage because that's not our specialty. That's not our jacket that we put on every day and go to work in, right? So we leave that to the professionals. And I think that we need to just kind of take advantage of that on both sides of things, because no man or woman is an island, right? We need to leverage the ecosystem that's built around us to help us get these things done in the right way, rather than just trying to YOLO all this stuff.
So as a consumer,
Yes.
what you're really saying, and I think it's true, like you said with work, is
Mhm.
that you have better things to do with your time than be an expert where there are experts already. So, the know when to hold them, know when to fold them. I'm like, if you're not sure, call somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
H&R Block doesn't exist just because they need to be there, right? They exist because all the other attempts at eliminating the individual tax guy hasn't happened, because I still don't necessarily know how I can itemize, my expenses, no matter how great the software gets. In fact, you can even make it worse by start thinking about things like, well, we swore that with Expedia and Travelocity that travel agents would go away. Then I remember when we were at our last endeavor, and I got a travel agent like on speed dial. I'm like, I don't have to scroll through plane flights and get stranded on the third of 4 hours of travel that was not actually on the plane, just sitting in an airport, and
Yeah.
someone else is taking care of that for me. So we've got all those professionals, we've got all those resources out there. But I think fundamentally that there's probably at least a couple areas that as consumers, we still need to have our own process and procedure. And maybe the limit of these documents that we would call process and procedures are limited to, say, one or two post-it notes. We're not talking like change the world, but I think of, and help me out because maybe I'm going to miss one here. When was the last time I rebooted my computer? When was the last time I checked to make sure everything was patched and up to date? And the third one was, I'm going to XYZ website. Do I at least see the lock? And if I have to log in, am I given the option of using two-factor authentication? Did I miss one?
I had like a flashback / nightmare of thinking back the last time I had to do kind of a big personal project, and that was when we moved. Right, think about all the things, all the checklists that you have to go through when it's the moving company tries to give you some lists, you try to get some lists here, but you're interacting with so many different organizations, right? Like your previous landlord, your new home, maybe a bank if you're buying, right? The moving company, your mailing address, your internet, your all these things, all your credit card companies, your banks, all these different people you have to interact with, and you have to put together a list fast. Right. A checklist manifesto is a great book and great way to kind of live life of putting together these lists. So I think in that kind of same way, we kind of come up with these things when we're forced to do them. Right. So I try to find in my life, because I got so much else going on, I try to find the path of least resistance. And one of the ones that I found was very interesting is it says, when you change your clocks, so twice a year, check your firmware. So twice a year, I go in and I check the firmware on my router, the firmware, and kind of all anything. I mean, and the list is growing these days, right? I gotta check the firmware on my light bulb, right? So just kind of creating a pattern.
On.
Yeah, I go into my Google Calendar and I set a monthly reminder to check the filter on the furnace, to kind of run a cleaning cycle on my washing machine, to run a cleaning cycle on my dishwasher. Right. So I think it's just building up habits, building up checklists, but do it in a way that it makes it again, super simple for us. So like you're saying, check your patches, check all those things. Just create an alert, once a month in your calendar of choice, right? Or go get the to-do app or something like that. But make it foolproof, make it dummy proof. So where something's beeping at you and squawking at you to do those kind of things. Because I've got post-it notes all over the place, but the first thing I do is something that my Outlook pops up and says, oh, you got to do this task, right? Like I got to do training here in a couple minutes.
Right.
And if I had a post-it note, I'd be talking with you for hours, right? So, really kind of know yourself, right? And force yourself into, there we go, post-its, right? And force yourself into doing these kind of best practices. But yeah, I think, again, I think it's said, I think it's, this horse has been beaten to death several times, but yet we're still not doing it, is, password, multi-factor authentication, password manager, updates. When we look at all these breaches that have been going on, it's been things like not having multi-factor.
Right.
It's been things about having password reuse with the whole, RockU 2021, 100
Right.
terabytes of usernames and passwords, right? All these things are going for those lowest hanging fruit. So if, I think there's always that joke when you go camping with your friends, like, oh, if a bear comes, I don't have to be faster than the bear. I just have to be faster than you. Right. So if we can just raise ourselves above, the other folks, horrible way to think about it, but if you're going to survive, sometimes you got to think in a dark way.
I think the best way to say that is don't move. They react to movement, and then you immediately turn and run.
No, that's a T-Rex.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Don't move. Yeah.
If it's brown, lay down. If it's black, attack. If it's white, good night. I think is the bear.
You just summarized cybersecurity for the consumer. If you can follow those three things, people, you've got this covered. Okay, so let's recap real quick, because I think this is a really good segue as we exit this episode. That, wait a second, this should be getting applied in the business world as much as it should be getting applied in the consumer world, because the reality is, if these things are being spelled out to an employee group, and it's done in such a way that it keeps it simple, it uses the KISS model, right? Then every single one of your employees is now being an advocate when they leave the office to go home. Their footprint is far greater than the footprint that my organization is going to have. So if I can get it right internally, I should be able to get it right at home and with my clients. So the three pillars were people. And the people part was to remember that we are people, and that as consumers, we like things that are convenient. We don't want it to be overly complicated, and doggone it, give me some choices. When we take that
behavior, right? And habits, behavior and habits, I think is great.
Right. And I think if we can, basically all we need to do is articulate that cybersecurity actually caters to that, but focus on what works for you, not trying to say, oh, I need the better. We talked about this before. The bank might not do two-factor authentication, using Okta or some other more sophisticated technology, but does it offer it at all? Because that's really the point, to take the option of, yes, I will have a little bit more security and be conscious of that. That's the people part. The second one was we really jumped into technology. So we'll obviously come back to process procedure. So on the product services side, as we consume technology, the reality is you don't have to do all of the things to be more secure, right? So if the only thing that you can do right now is implement a password manager, oh wait, you use a browser, it probably has something baked in that is better than not using one at all. I want to emphasize, I'm not promoting browsers as a password manager. I'm just saying that if you can't figure out or aren't sure how to go about adopting a full-on password manager, start with storing your passwords somewhere besides on a Post-it note, so you can put passwords in that are not, I can remember them, right? We can remember 5 passwords potentially. If you go beyond 5, they're all variations of the same password. So that's password, there's a technology. Yeah. And then last but not least, we can jump into, walk me through the process procedure. We gave easy examples, like you have a will, you've done some of these things. And the reality at the end of the day, if you can just put this into a Post-it note, or like you said, more sophisticated, you can put this into a Google Calendar or some sort of calendar that says, reminder, it's the first of the month. These are the things that you need to do.
Mhm.
I think we can collectively become a more secure society and collectively battle cybersecurity because, like you said, easy button, low hanging fruit. Hackers are not any more sophisticated than the people that they're hacking. They make the
Auto
same
updates,
mistakes.
right? Auto
Yeah.
patching. Listen, I have my rent go out automatically. I should have my computer update automatically, and anything that doesn't, I should have it on a kind of a regular cadence where I go and do the check, and I also keep emailing the vendor, being like, "Why don't you have auto updates? Why don't you have auto
Well,
updates?"
I mean, it's like buying a computer. The sophistication of the computer life cycle evolution has been, ooh, more memory, more memory. Why? Because we need more memory to handle the process and loads that we're putting on them. And as people, you can't add any more memory to the capacity of the computer. It's limited.
Or if
No,
anything, it slowly atrophies. Like
right.
your computer over the years, you actually lose memory and lose
I think
memory.
ROM chips actually dissolve in the motherboard as
Yes,
the brain computer ages.
for sure.
So I have to say, this might be one of the shorter episodes of MSP 1337. For those of you listening out there, if you've got questions or ideas on how you think you can better educate the people that work for your clients, the people that work in your own organization, or doggone it, your family members who just can't seem to wrap their heads around locking the door, old fashioned lock the door. Maybe, just maybe, some of these tips that Josh and I have come up with will work for you. So, with that, thanks everybody. Have a great week.